Hello, Year 4s. In our next flipped classroom video, we're briefly going to go over what a folktale is. So we have read through our story map, and our story map focuses on the Emperor's New Clothes, which I hope is a story that some of you had heard before. But in this video, we're going to look at what folktales are. So, a folk tale is an old story that originally was passed down orally or by word of mouth, which means that it wasn't actually when the story started, it wasn't written down, it was told from mouth to mouth. So someone, for example, if I told you a story and then you told somebody else the same story, and then that person passed on that story. So we're not that we're reading it off of something, we are just remembering it from my head, and I'm telling you the story, and then you are remembering the story, and then you are telling someone else. So that's what they mean by word of mouth. Something is passed from one person to another by telling them. So folk tales were told for entertainment, but many of them also teach lessons about proper behavior and show what values are important to a community. Often, folk tales feature animals who behave like humans, and the word that we use to describe animals behaving like humans, so animals with human characteristics, we call it anthropomorphism. And that is the special word I want you to tell your teacher once you've finished watching this video. What word do we use to describe an animal who behaves like humans? So if they have human characteristics, we call that anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is an animal who behaves like a human. So folk tales come from all over the world. There's no known author, so they don't actually know where they originated from. You will find some fairy tales written down here. We've got Hans Christian Andersen stories. That's where we got our story map from, but obviously these have been passed down, and then eventually someone has actually written them down. Folk tales often don't have a specific time or a specific place. So they often start with once upon a time or long, long ago, because it's not telling you that this happened 2 years ago or last Tuesday or yesterday. It's saying it was many, many years ago, but it's not specific about when many years ago. It just says many years ago. It also means they are placeless. So often they'll just say many, many years ago in a land far away, not telling you specifically where the land is, but it's just telling you it was many years ago in a place somewhere, okay? There's often a hero in your story who can overcome an evil character. Maybe your story will have magic of some kind. Sometimes there's a bit of trickery involved with the characters. So in our story, obviously, the weavers trick the emperor into believing that there was actually a very fancy material. Many times we've got the pattern of 3 or things happen in 3. So we've got the 3 little pigs is an example of that. Goldilocks and the 3 bears, also another example. And then often in our stories, we'll see that characters learn some kind of a lesson. So just to help us with these, folk tales can then be broken up into different types of folk tales. So we get fairy tales, fables, myths, legends, and tall tales. These all fit under folk tales, which originally are oral stories that don't have an original author, so they're anonymous, and we find these in all different cultures. They're timeless and they're placeless. So if we look at that, these are just some examples of what you would find in each one of these stories. So we're looking at characters, settings, problems, maybe solutions. So in fairy tales, we often find royalty, we find animals. They're often set in a castle or a forest. We've got a good versus evil. There's a good character and a bad character. And sometimes there's magic. We've got, sometimes we use our pattern of 3. and then often there's a happy ending at the end of them. Fables are shorter stories, but they're still folk tales, and they often include animals that have human characteristics, which, who remembers the word? It was anthropomorphism. And so animals acting like people, they're generally outside somewhere, and there's only usually one problem or using trickery, and then ends with a lesson. So there's always kind of a moral at the end of the story. So if you look at the story of the tortoise and the hare, about how the tortoise just kept going, and the hare, he was really lazy, and he went and had a sleep, and then he actually lost the race because he was lazy, whereas the tortoise kept going and kept trying, right? Myths include gods and goddesses. There's no specific setting, and usually they explain something that happens in nature by using the gods and the goddesses in their stories. And you have that the good is rewarded, and then if there's bad, they're obviously punished. And they often include magic, unusual creatures, and they also can teach you a lesson. Legends are everyday people, include everyday people. Animals are often the main characters. There's no specific setting. They explain how or why something in nature came to be. And there's also, again, magic, or we learn a lesson. And then lastly, we get tall tales, which are based on the life of a real person. And these are everyday people with superhuman abilities. So tall tale, they're stretching the tale. It's over the top. They could be linked to real historical time periods. There's problem solved in a humorous way, and then exaggerated detail. So again, it's over the top and tells you about the person's accomplishment. So all these kinds of stories all fit under the big label of folk tales. So what I want you to remember and tell your teacher after you've finished watching this video was that really big word that explains animals that have human characteristics.